Hello everyone! In this video lesson, we will talk about the law of demand, how demand curve looks like, when and how it shifts, what are the determinants of demand, and how we can use this knowledge in order to analyze different situations on the market. So generally, demand and supply theory, demand and supply model is the very basic tool which is used in economics. This is extremely powerful. It's very simple, but very, very powerful. You can use it to analyze a variety of different situations. For example, you can understand how different economic conditions, how various changes in the market will affect the price of the product which you sell, or the quantity of products which you will be able to provide to your customers. You can also evaluate different economic policies by the government. For example, the introduction of minimum wage laws or rent caps in the housing market and other various production incentives. You can also analyze different changes in the trade policy, for example, the introduction of trade tariffs or import quotas, etc. You will be able to understand how all these different policies will affect consumers and producers, how they will influence their welfare. But of course, this tool, demand and supply theory, is extremely useful for producers in order to understand what price to charge for their product, how many items they need to produce in order to maximize their profit. It's a very simple model, but extremely valuable. So let's proceed. So this is what exactly you need to know in order to be able to use this model effectively. First of all, you will need to understand how demand curve looks like, how to construct the demand curve, what are the determinants of demand which define the location and the slope and the shape of the demand curve, what factors will shift demand curve up or down. You will also need to understand the key difference between movements along the demand curve and the shift in the demand curve. Also, we'll study different types of goods and their effect on the demand relationship. So what exactly demand is? Demand is the relationship between the price of a product and the quantity which consumers are willing to purchase at this particular price. For example, let's imagine that we are sitting in a large classroom with many students, let's say 100 students, and I'm offering you to buy a new smartphone at different prices. So let's just analyze data in this table. In the first column, we have price of the good. P is the conventional notation for price in economics, and QD stands for quantity demanded at this price. So let's imagine that I'm offering you to buy this new smartphone at the price of £1,000. Let's imagine that in our group there will be 2 students who will be prepared to buy this particular model, for example, a new iPhone at this price, £1,000. It's expensive, so there will be very few people who are willing to purchase this product. If price drops from 1,000 to, let's say, £600, there will be more people willing to purchase this product, let's say 8 students. When price drops further to £400, there will be even more customers, 15 in this case. When price drops to 100, there will be quite a lot of potential customers, let's say 40. And when the price drops to a very low level, let's say £20, nearly everyone will want to buy it. Let's say 100 customers will be prepared to buy. So this table illustrates the demand relationships. It shows what will be the quantity demanded at each and every price. For example, 15 units when price is equal to 400. We can represent this relationship on a graph. We can draw the demand curve. Demand curve will show us the relationship between quantity demanded at each and every price and the price of a good. The demand curve is downward sloping. Let's have a look. If we plot price of a product along vertical axis, we will always have monetary variables located along vertical axis in economics, and quantity along horizontal axis. Q stands for quantity. Demand curve will be downward sloping. It shows us that as the price goes down, quantity demanded will increase. So, for example, if we are initially located at point A, the original price is P1, quantity demanded will be Q1, a relatively small quantity. As price drops from P1 to P2, we move along this demand curve to point B. Consumers will be prepared to purchase more. Quantity demanded will increase from Q1 to Q2. The lower the price, the higher the quantity purchased. And this idea is called the law of demand. Holding other things equal, consumers will want to purchase more as price goes down, and the other way around. Now, let's learn about the difference between quantity demanded and demand itself. This is the key difference which students frequently find difficult to understand. There will be quite a lot of questions about this in the exam, so please make sure that you are clear about this difference. This is the key area. It's not that difficult, but it's important to understand. So, quantity demanded shows how many units consumers are willing to purchase at each individual price, at a single price. For example, when price of an apple is 50p, there will be 100 of students who are willing to purchase it in our BCU canteen every day. How many units will be purchased at each individual price, at a single price? While demand itself will show the whole relationship between all possible prices and related quantities which will be purchased by consumers. So quantity demanded is a single quantity purchased at an individual price, while demand is the whole relationship between all possible prices and all possible quantities. If we come back to the previous slide, which we've had already, our table, so quantity demanded is a single number. For each individual price, we will have a single number. This is quantity demanded. It's a single unit, single figure. While demand is the whole table, is the whole relationship between all possible prices and all possible quantities. Why it is important? It is important to distinguish between demand and quantity demanded because changes in these variables will affect the demand curve differently. Change in the price of a good will cause change in the quantity demanded and will lead to a movement along the same demand curve. So when price of a good changes, there will be change in the quantity. For each price, there will be a separate quantity. When price changes, quantity will change as well. As a result, we'll move along the same demand curve, up or down. While when we experience the change in demand itself, in the whole demand relationship, we'll experience the shift in the demand curve. And this will happen when there will be change in any other factor apart from price of our product. So for example, when price of an apple drops, there will be more students willing to purchase this apple for their lunch. For example, price was 50p per apple, there were 100 customers, now price drops to 10p and there will be 200 customers. We'll have a movement along the same demand curve. The demand curve remains the same, it's unchanged, but will move downwards along the same curve towards higher quantities and lower prices. While when we experience the change in demand, the whole table breaks down. There will be different quantities for each existing price, lower or higher quantities. And this will take place when we experience change in any other factor apart from the price itself. For example, income of students can change. When our students are richer, they might be able to purchase more apples at any given price. Even if the price remains the same, students will be able to purchase more simply because they have higher budgets. They are richer, so they can buy more. We'll experience a shift in the whole demand curve. When there is an increase in demand, the curve will shift to the right. When demand drops, we will experience leftward shift closer towards the origin. Now, let's list the factors. Let's discuss the factors which can cause this shift in the demand curve, and then I will show you how this happens on a graph. So the first and most important factor which affects the demand curve is availability and prices of other goods, substitutes and complements. I mentioned in the beginning of this session that you need to study different types of goods and how they affect demand. This is exactly what I'm going to cover in a few minutes. Availability and prices of other goods, substitutes and complements will shift the demand curve. Next, income. For normal goods, for goods which we prefer to buy more when they become cheaper, quantity demanded will increase when income rises. So this is the most common factor which will shift the demand curve. The richer the consumers, the higher the demand for products, and the other way around. Tastes can also shift the demand curve. For example, a successful advertising campaign or fashion trends can increase demand for certain products or reduce this when the product goes out of fashion. Consumer expectations can shift the demand. For example, if we expect changes in the market situation, we can start buying more of a product. If you recall the start of the lockdown period, when the COVID hit the economy, consumers started to stockpile on products, on food items, on toilet paper, on hand sanitizers, because they expected problems with supply. So they expected that it will be difficult to get what they needed, so they stockpiled on food items, for example, to ensure that they have enough at their home in case if they won't be able to purchase enough. Expectations, they had negative expectations, and this affected the demand curve. Changes in population will shift the demand curve. The higher the population, the greater the demand will be, other things being equal. Changes in legislation can affect demand. For example, new changes in law can create or reduce demand for particular products. For example, when there are new regulations to control pollution, there will be high demand for anti-pollution equipment, which can allow companies to obey with this new law. Let's have a look at these shifts in the demand curve on a graph, and I will explain you this in a little bit more details, so hopefully you will understand it. Let's imagine that we have our original demand curve labeled as D0. D, again, is the conventional notation. This is how we will label demand curve. Price is along vertical axis, quantity is along horizontal axis. Originally, we are located at this blue dot when price is equal to P, and our original quantity is Q0. There will be a shift in the demand curve, for example, caused by higher income. When income of customers go up, for example, economy is booming, consumers are getting higher income, they are paid more, their income increases, they feel richer, so they start consuming more. How it will be reflected on our demand graph? It means that at any given price, consumers will be prepared to purchase more. Instead of being in this blue dot when price is P, we can now start buying higher quantities. Instead of buying Q0, we'll buy higher number, Q1 number of units. And this will be true for each and every point on the demand curve. Regardless of what the price was, now we'll be able to start buying higher quantities. We'll shift every point on the blue line towards the red line. Possible causes of this shift outwards, higher demand. Rise in consumer income, as I mentioned. This can also happen if the product becomes fashionable, or, for example, when consumers expect a rise in the price in the future. For example, our stockpiling situation, when consumers expected an increase in food items or price of hand sanitizers going up, they started to stockpile, to buy much more than they needed before price goes up. They decided to increase their stocks. Or when population increases, apparently if we have more citizens in our country, when we have, for example, high number of immigrants coming to the UK or number of international students joining our population, we can expect increase in demand for food, accommodation, healthcare services, and so on. Increase in demand can also take place when there is a rise in price of substitute goods. Again, recall different types of products, different types of goods, and their effect on demand. There are substitute products to our goods which we sell. Substitutes are the products which fulfill the same need. These are products of our competitors. For example, different types of coffee, cappuccino and latte. You used to buy both. Sometimes you buy cappuccino, sometimes you buy latte, depending on your mood. And for example, starting from Monday, price of latte goes up. You are likely to start buying more of cappuccino. You will switch to another product. Simply because latte becomes more expensive, you start buying more of cappuccino. So as a result, we can experience higher demand for cappuccino at any given price, simply because competitor products are now more expensive and people switch away from them. Similarly, we can experience increase in demand when price of a complementary goods drop. For example, cars and petrol are complementary goods. These are goods which are consumed together. When price of cars drop, we are likely to experience higher demand for petrols. Cars become cheaper, people will start buying more cars, and as a result, they will need to buy more petrol. So consumers will start purchasing more petrol at any given price, simply because they're using cars more frequently. Changing the price of complementary good will affect demand for our product. Demand and income. Let's have a look at the relationship between demand and income. Income is one of the most important determinants of demand. As before, this is our demand curve, price along vertical axis, quantity along horizontal axis. Our original demand curve D, we are initially located at this point on the demand curve when price is P0 and quantity is Q0. When income goes up, our demand curve will shift towards this new purple line. Rise in income will lead to increase in demand for normal goods. Demand curve will shift to the right. At any given price, we'll start buying more simply because we can afford to buy more. For example, demand for holidays, regardless of the price of holidays, doesn't really matter how expensive these holidays are, consumers will start buying more. This will be the case for top-of-the-range holidays, very expensive, all-inclusive 5-star hotels. Even if consumers used to buy very little, very few of these holidays, now they will be able to purchase more. And this will be the case for budget holidays. Even if price was cheap, consumers will start buying more of them. Regardless of the price, quantity demanded will be higher for each and every price when consumer income goes up. And similarly, when income drops, demand curve will move in the opposite direction, to the left, closer to the origin. Regardless of the price, we'll be able to purchase less at each and every price. Demand curve will shift from this black line towards this blue line. Now, let's again have a look at different types of goods. There are two different classifications. We can separate goods into normal and inferior goods, and also we can distinguish between substitutes and complements. So let's have a look at the first classification, normal and inferior goods. Normal good is simply a good which you tend to purchase more when your income goes up. Consumption increases when your income goes up. And you buy less of this product when your income drops for any given price. Most goods are normal, so majority of goods which we are buying are normal. We want more of them when we become richer and less if we cannot afford them. There is another type of good which is interesting. It's an inferior good. It's a good for which demand drops when you become richer. You buy less of this product when your income increases. For example, Tesco value instant noodles. They cost something like 20p a pack. When you feel really, really poor, you buy lots of them. But as your income increases, you switch away from this product towards something else. What is important to understand about inferior goods is that they have nothing to do with quality. It doesn't really mean that the quality of these instant noodles is poor in any way. This can be a perfect high quality product, but you simply switch away from it because you start preferring something else when you become richer, when your income increases. For example, let's consider different products which people choose for lunch depending on their income. The moment you are a student, you are on relatively low income, let's say £500 per month. This is all you have to spend. You need to have lunch every day, and you choose, let's say, sandwiches from Tesco for your lunch. Sandwiches cost you £2 each, and this is what you used to buy. You buy one sandwich every working day, so 5 packs per week. This is your quantity demanded. Then your income goes up. You graduated from BCU, you started working for a company, and now your income is £3,000 per month. Your income increased. You still need to have 5 lunches per week, per working week, but because you can afford to buy different items now, you might prefer to switch away from sandwiches. You can start buying, for example, sushi for your lunch, or sometimes you dine in a local restaurant and you buy some steaks for your lunch. And now you are buying, instead of 5 sandwiches per week, you are buying just 2 sandwiches per week. It doesn't mean that the quality of sandwiches deteriorated. It's simply because you feel richer, you switch away from this product towards something else which you prefer more, which you like better. Another scenario. After you worked for a company for, let's say, 10 years, you became a millionaire, you set up your own business, and you became extremely, extremely successful. You still work for your own company now, but your income is now £1 million per month. You still need to have 5 lunches per week during working days. But now, instead of going to a local restaurant and buying steaks, you buy caviar or lobsters instead. There is nothing wrong with steaks. Steaks were superior compared to sandwiches, but now you prefer to buy some other products, seafood or caviar or something else. And instead of having 2 steaks per week, you buy 1 steak per month. There is nothing wrong with steaks. Again, they are of perfect quality, but you switch away from them when you feel richer. This example is an illustration how one product can be superior relative to other products. Steaks are superior compared to sandwiches, but it is inferior compared to caviar. So inferiority has nothing to do with quality, and inferiority can only express itself when you compare a product to something else. When I ask you about sandwiches, you don't know whether this product is inferior or superior. You can only know what type of product it is when you compare it with other products. So summary, normal goods are goods which you buy more when your income goes up, and inferior goods are goods when you buy less when your income goes up. Apart from income, another important determinant which will affect the location of the demand curve, which will shift the demand curve to the left or to the right, is the price of other goods, substitutes and complements, which I've mentioned already. Substitute is a similar good which can replace our product in consumption. So basically, it's a product of our competitor. For example, two different brands of toothpaste, Colgate or Blendermet. Generally, they do the same thing. We are more or less indifferent between buying one brand or over another. We can prefer one brand if it's cheaper or we somehow feel that it's better for us, but we can switch away from buying our preferred product to another product if prices change. For substitutes, an increase in the price of one leads to increase in the quantity demanded of the other. For example, if we used to buy Colgate toothpaste, when it becomes more expensive, we can start buying less of Colgate toothpaste and start buying more of a Blendermet instead. So increasing the price of one will lead to increase in the quantity purchased of another. It will shift the demand for another toothpaste to the right. Complement is a product which is consumed together with our good. For example, car and petrol, which I've discussed already, or printer and ink. You cannot use the printer without an ink, and the other way around. There is no point in having ink if you don't have a printer. These two products can be sold separately but consumed together. And prices of each of these goods will affect demand for the complementary product. For complementary goods, an increase in the price of one will lead to decrease in the quantity of another. So summary, very important distinction between demand and quantity demanded. This is the most important slide from today's lecture. So if you're making any notes, put an exclamation mark next to this slide. This is the key thing to learn from this week. Change in the price of our good will change quantity demanded and will cause a movement along the same demand curve. Demand curve will not shift. When price of our product changes, we simply move along the same demand curve. Quantity demanded will be affected, but not demand itself. We will buy different quantities at a new different price, but demand curve will remain the same. When we will experience change in any other factor apart from the price of our good, this will cause the breakdown of the whole demand relationship. It will shift the whole demand curve to the right or to the left. This is the key from today's lecture. So let me just ask you a few questions. This is the type of question which you can get in your exam. Very simple question. In the exam, you're likely to get something more difficult, but let's just try to answer this now. For example, which way will the market demand for petrol shift if the price of car rises? Write down your answer, stop the video, write down the answer, and continue when you are ready. Ready? So let's have a look at the logic. When price of cars goes up, cars become more expensive. This means that consumers will start buying less cars. The quantity demanded for cars will drop. People will use cars less frequently, and because of this, they will need less petrol. So there will be less petrol purchased at each and every price. That is why the market demand for petrol will shift to the left, closer to the origin. The correct answer is B. Next question. Which way will the market demand for petrol shift if petrol becomes more expensive? Again, stop the video, write down the answer, and continue when you are ready. Ready? The correct answer is C, no shift. Why is that? Because we are talking about petrol itself becoming more expensive. When price of our product, petrol, goes up, This will cause a change in the quantity demanded. Demand itself will remain the same. We'll simply move to a different point on the same demand curve. So there will be a movement along the curve. Petrol expensive, we'll buy less of this, so we'll move along the same demand curve. So if you imagine the demand curve, which is downward sloping, we'll move from this point upwards towards higher price and lower quantity. Next question, let's discuss the effect on the margarine market of a reduction in butter prices. So price of butter is now lower. How will this affect another market of a substitute product? Stop the video, answer the question, continue when you are ready. Ready? To illustrate this effect, I've drawn you another set of graphs. Let's have a look. These are two graphs, demand curves, which represent two different markets, market of butter and market of margarine. So let's have a look. Let's imagine that initially we're located at point A in both markets. So initial price of butter was P0, we're at point A, and at this point we consume Q0 units of butter. At the margarine market, we're located at point A, original price was some price P0, and originally we purchased this number of units, Q0. Then price of butter drops, butter becomes cheaper, price goes down from P0 to P1, which means that we are moving along the same demand curve for butter from point A to point B. As butter becomes cheaper, we are buying more of butter. Instead of buying Q0, we now buy Q1. How will this affect the market of margarine? Because margarine is a substitute product, butter and margarine fulfill the same need more or less. As butter becomes cheaper, we switch away from consuming margarine because a substitute product is now cheaper. So instead of buying Q0 units of margarine, we'll be buying less. And this will be the case for each and every price. At our original price, P0 will now move from point A to point B. We'll buy less. And this will be the case regardless of the price. If price was higher, we would move from some point on the black line towards a point on the new demand curve, on the new blue demand curve line. So every point on the demand curve for margarine will move to the left. In other words, we will experience a shift in the demand for margarine to the left, closer to the origin. This will be the correct answer. Now let's have a look what option this will be in our question. So shift in the supply incorrect, supply won't be affected. We are talking about changes in the demand. So E we can cross out, it's incorrect. Increase in the demand for margarine is wrong. We will experience a drop in demand. C, decrease demand for margarine at all prices. This is the correct answer. We can select this. Let's have a look at other options. Leave the demand for margarine unaffected. This would be incorrect because when we have changes in substitute products, prices in a substitute market, this will affect our demand. It cannot remain unaffected. We can cross it out. And the final answer is increase the price of margarine by an identical amount. No, this is not the case because only butter prices have dropped. We're not told anything about the change in price. Nothing happens to the price. It will be change in the demand relationship. The correct answer is C. And the final slide which we need to consider today is the difference between individual and market demand curve. This is rather self-explanatory. It's not difficult to understand. An individual demand curve is simply the demand curve of individual buyer. And the market demand curve represents the demand from all buyers, represents the combined demand by each and every consumer, and it can be derived by adding up individual demand curves for each consumer at each possible price. Let's imagine that we are talking about demand for books. Our market consists of several buyers, for example John and Edwards. They have different demand curves for books. For example, when price is 20, John buys 3 books per term, for example, while Edward only buys 1 book at this particular price, which means that when price is 20, we add up John's demand plus Edward's demand, 3 plus 1, which means that the market demand will be equal to 4 at this particular price. And this is the case for each and every price. We can add up individual quantities purchased by each buyer at each and every price, and we will get the total. Market demand curve will be flatter because at each and every price consumers will be buying more units, so our horizontal axis will be more spread out. There will be more quantities along horizontal axis, so combined market demand curve will be flatter. So horizontal summing figures on the vertical axis prices remain the same, but we add up individual quantities. 3 plus 1, for example, will be equal to 4 when price is 20. This is it. This is all you needed to know for this particular week. A compulsory reading is shown here on the screen now. There are a few other slides in this presentation. If you want, you can have a look through this. I do recommend that students from economics program go through these slides, demand functions, how exactly they are derived mathematically. Have a look through this if you prefer. This will help you to understand more advanced material in further economics modules, but this material will not be examined. So have a look at this if you prefer. Please make sure that you do exercises for Introduction to Economics from your seminar workbooks. That's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Bye-bye.